Well, hello boys and girls, and welcome back to Beyond Borders. In this episode, I talked to a language learning hero of mine, Olly Richards from I Will Teach You a Language. Now back in the day, when I was learning Spanish, French, and Catalan, I found the advice on Olly's blog so inspiring. So I'm incredibly excited that today I get to share some of his insights about how to learn English alone with you. Olly, welcome to the show.
It's an honor to be here, man. Thanks for the invitation.
For those of you that are new here, I want to invite you to hit that subscribe button and the bell down below so that you don't miss any new lessons. Like Maria, a real-lifer who says that thanks to our lessons, she is no longer scared of mistakes. So join our community so that we can help you to go beyond the classroom and understand fast speech, be understood by anyone, and connect to the world. Aw, yeah.
So kind of continuing, I guess, just with language learning tips, something interesting I saw that I want to ask you about is, what is the Pareto Principle? And because I've heard about this applied to business and things like that, but how do you apply it to learning a language?
Yeah, this is quite, I find this quite commonly misunderstood actually with language learning. So the Pareto Principle is also known as the 80-20 rule. And it's the idea that a very small number of things account for most of the effect. And so in language learning, there's a few different ways to apply this. And one way to apply this is to think, I'm going to learn the most common words in the language. So for example, in English, it's commonly said that that there are 100 words which account for 50% of everything that's said. For example, words like there, he, go, on. These words are so common that you can learn like 50% of all language by just learning those 100 words. So a lot of people say, well, if you learn a new language, start by learning those words first. I used to do that, but actually I don't think that's a great thing to do anymore, because the thing is, these common words, you're going to learn them anyway if you just speak the language or read books or whatever. So I don't see any need to actually focus on learning those things at first. The way that I like to apply the 80-20 rule in language learning is to think, okay, you can do all of these things. You can read books, you can watch TV, you can speak, you can learn grammar. But what is the one thing that's going to get you most of your results, and then just spend all of your time doing that? So in my case, I don't really believe that learning lists of words is very helpful. I don't believe that studying grammar is very helpful. What I believe is that input should be the thing that you spend most of your time on, because input is where you're going to actually learn the language and have the opportunity to learn words, learn phrases, learn grammar. And so that can be watching TV series, like in your approach. It can be reading books of stories, like in my approach. But what I like to do when I'm learning a new language is to spend 80% of my time on input, and then just 20% of my time on other things.
That's a really great idea. I think that a lot of learners tend to maybe just focus on, what they think are these things that people tell them they should do and stuff, but it's kind of, you always need to be curious and experimenting and finding what's going to work the best for you. And I love that focus on input too, because adults don't learn exactly like children do, but I think there are some things that we can borrow from the way that babies learn, and that's like one example, is that they learn by listening for a very long time before they speak. And I think it's important to speak from the very beginning too, but a lot of your focus should go into that listening aspect of it, and maybe not on just memorizing vocabulary lists, which you're going to be bored to tears, right?
Now, it can be very difficult on your own to actually apply the Pareto Principle. In other words, to identify the 20% of effort that will give you 80% of results. So with our Real Life Native Immersion course, you will get real-life audio lessons and learn to understand 100% of them. Furthermore, you will get the tools that you need to understand English speakers in virtually any situation without feeling lost. You can try it for free right now. So what are you waiting for? Sign up for our Power Learning mini course by clicking up here or down the description below.
So the reason is that learning any skill, it has to be something that you learn for yourself. If you think about confident speakers, so I mean, Ethan, you live in Barcelona, you speak Spanish, you speak Catalan as well. If you think about, when you walk into a bar or a restaurant or an event, and you go up to someone and you just say hi to them, and you introduce yourself, the confidence that you have to do that, the way that you hold your body, your body language, the intonation in your voice, the way that you deliver, the way that you speak, and the confidence that you speak with, that doesn't come from something you learned in a textbook. That comes from something that you've done many times in real life. And so this, I think, applies across the board with language learning. We have to learn these things by ourselves, and we need the way that you learn something and have confidence that it's right is by learning it by yourself. And so I think a lot of the time, people look for the solutions in teachers. They say, okay, if I find a teacher and I pay them money, they will teach me. But what you're really doing there is you're giving the responsibility, you're transferring the responsibility to the teacher and say, teacher, you teach me. Yeah, you're the professional. I'm paying you. Now you teach me.
Right.
And teachers can help, absolutely. But even the best teachers, what they will do is, the best teachers know that real learning doesn't happen in the classroom. Real learning happens when you go home and you spend time with the language yourself. Maybe you're reading a book, maybe even if you're going through a textbook or something. It's when you're studying by yourself in a quiet space with time to think. That's when you really learn. Right. And so the teacher really is a guide. And the teacher can help guide your learning. They can help suggest things that you can do, help you find resources. But they can't do the learning for you. I always like to say that a language cannot be taught; it can only be learned. And so I like to try to encourage people to believe that they can learn by themselves, because as soon as you take the responsibility to learn by yourself, that's when you really learn the lessons, really learn the language, and then be able to do things like, walk into a bar and use the language in a confident, natural way.
Right. That's a really, really important paradigm shift that definitely when I was teaching, I would always try to have my students realize that from very early on, like even keeping a log of their learning, for example, so that they could start to kind of like shift their perspective from what we were doing in class, which is important, but it's really just kind of like that guidance and feedback, to actually taking responsibility to learning outside of the classroom. And, how much time are you spending? Are you creating your own immersive experience and everything? So that's I think an absolutely crucial step there. Yeah, I think that's really important too, just for that. You're kind of talking about giving yourself those feelings of success from early on, because you can read a book and you can understand a little bit, you can listen to something and you can understand a little bit. And so you're not jumping right into something, maybe like trying to watch an entire movie in the language that you're learning, that's going to probably just make you feel overwhelmed. And so you won't, you might end up giving up just because you feel like you can't do it. But I really like what you're talking about, using kind of like these short stories that are actually written for your level, or audios that are recorded for your level. And I think the other thing there too, was saying that 80-20 is like recognizing that when you're learning a language, it can't always be fun 100% of the time. You need that kind of like 20% of deliberate practice of study time. But let's keep a lot of it fun so that you stay motivated, right?
Well, I think there's always going to be a balance. You need a little bit of this and a little bit of that. That's inevitable. But I think because of our education system, the way that we're taught in schools, the balance is like this, in favor of traditional study and tests. So for people listening, basically, I raised my my hand up just to show that most of what we do is learning grammar, memorizing vocabulary, taking tests and things like that. And like that stuff isn't wrong. That can be useful, but it shouldn't be 80% of what we do. It should be maybe 20% of what we do.
Right.
And so I think in language learning in general, the balance is wrong. We have the balance wrong, and we need to reverse that balance so we can spend a little bit of time learning grammar or whatever, but then most of our time should be actually with input and immersion, which is how we learn our mother tongue. If you think about how you learned English, Ethan, it was by hearing English spoken by your family all around you, by bedtime stories and things like that. We learn our languages by being immersed in it, and so that's the thing that we should borrow from native speakers.
All right. And so you're talking a lot about input. At what point during this, say again, kind of coming back to the student who's starting out and they're going through this autonomous approach, at what point do you recommend to them that they start speaking?
So that's the kind of simple answer. Lots of input, learn the language, and then start to speak. I think in an ideal world, that's the best approach, because you are just waiting to do things at the time when they make the most sense. Now, we don't live in a perfect world, and we are all different, and we all get motivated by different things. So the reality is that many people find speaking the most motivating thing of all. And I'm one of those people. I love speaking on day one of learning a new language because I just enjoy it. I enjoy communicating with people. I enjoy trying things out. I don't care if I make mistakes. I learn languages because I want to connect with people. That's the thing for me that's most fun. And so for that reason, I like to speak right at the beginning, even though I generally advise people not to do it. I do that though because I understand that motivates me. And because I know that I find it fun and I don't care about making mistakes and things like that, and I know that it's going to motivate me to keep learning, I do it. But the thing is, I've met many, many learners who get very scared and very intimidated by speaking, by feeling like they have pressure to speak at the beginning. And so for that reason, I like to give people an option and say, it's okay, you don't have to speak. The thing about the internet, Ethan, is that there's a lot of people online on YouTube saying things like, yeah, you have to speak from the beginning, speak from day one, like first day, start speaking. A lot of people tend to put pressure on in that way, and it can be good for some people, but it can be harmful for other people. And one of the good things about what both of us do, and what I've found over the years by helping so many people with language learning, is I get to meet people from very, very different backgrounds. And it's been very interesting for me to meet many people, many students of mine who do feel a lot of pressure and a lot of anxiety around speaking. And so I think it's important for those people to give them the option and to say, it's okay, you don't have to speak. It's perfectly fine to spend 3, 6, 12 months learning the language by yourself through input, through immersion, and then to start to speak later when you're ready. So those are the two perspectives, and there's no right answer.
I think it's like everything else in language learning is you have to try different things and find what works best for you. But I certainly think if people haven't considered the option of speaking early on, that can be beneficial for a lot of us, just because some people can become very perfectionist about it. And so they're like, I'm not there yet. Someday I'll speak, but I need to like learn a little bit more. So I think if you do choose that approach, that you're going to kind of build up your competencies before you start speaking, I think it's really important that you maybe set yourself a deadline or do something just to make sure you don't fall into that trap, that someday trap, you know?
You're absolutely right. You do have to remember that someday you are going to have to start speaking, and the big danger is that you wait too long and then it just becomes this huge thing in your mind that stops you from doing it.
So why should people learn first stories?
Well, it's my favorite topic. The thing about stories is that stories are the most basic form of communication that we have. You know, if you think about the earliest drawings inside caves, there's a reason that people did that 10,000 years ago, 20,000 years ago. They wanted to show that these things are happening in my life. You know, I was chasing an antelope to kill it and cook it, and then whilst fighting off a bear and running away from a lion. You know, this is my life, and I want to communicate that. I want to tell other people what my life was like. And so it's in our DNA to learn with stories, to use stories to communicate. You know, when you meet up with your friend, what do? You tell your friend what happened to you last week when you were walking down the street. You know, stories are how we communicate. And so when you read a story in another language, there's a part of it that you already understand. Most stories follow similar patterns. You know, it's commonly said there are only 7 basic plots to any story. We know what it means to follow the hero, the hero's journey, as it's called, through a story. We understand the arc of the story, how a story changes. And so when you're reading a story, okay, the language might be new, but the story itself is something that you already understand. And so you're giving yourself something to hold on to, a bit like when you're climbing a wall. You know, you're climbing a wall, you've got these things, the handholds that you can hold on to help you up. And so that's the starting point. Story is something that is something we already understand and know. It's very different to a rule in a textbook, which is something completely abstract, completely, it has nothing to do with how we use a language. It's just an explanation. A story is real. A story is something we understand. But there's a lot more, because when you read a story, you never see words individually. You see words in a sentence. You see words that make a sentence that uses grammar. You see dialogue. You see people talking and saying things. And so when you're learning from stories, what you're doing is you're always seeing how to use the language. You know, what words go together. You know, you don't just put something, you put up with something, or you put something on something. You learn which words kind of go together in a natural way. Right. Which means that, again, it's very different from a traditional way of learning where you learn a grammar rule or an individual word, but you don't know how to use it. If you think about the idea of spending 80% of your time with stories, you're going to be very familiar with how the language works by the end of it. You might not understand everything. You might not understand exactly how everything works, but you'll start to know it in your head. And this is how native speakers learn their language. They don't understand the grammar, but they just know that it's true. Learning a language through a story is a very, very holistic experience. It uses our whole brain. And when you use your whole brain, you form connections, and that's how memories are formed as well. So stories give you the whole language all together in one place, and that's why they're so powerful.
I just know a lot of English learners who aren't so able to travel. So how do you recommend that learners maintain the motivation to learn when they aren't fully surrounded by the language and they can't necessarily speak it every single day?
So I think it's about connecting with the things that you enjoy, and then using that opportunity to do that. So if you love Friends, watch Friends. If you like reading, get a bunch of books and spend that time reading. It's okay. The world will open up again, and you'll get the chance to use the language again. But I think if you can kind of try to remember the fact that, you know, if you're sort of sitting and you're spending time with the book and you're absorbing what's in the book, this will help you later on to be able to do the things you really want to do, like the speaking and the communication. It's not just, you're not wasting your time. You're not doing anything wrong. You're using this opportunity to learn. So think carefully about the things that you enjoy and spend time doing that in the language.
Yeah, I think that's a great tip. Is if you can just make it something that you love doing, that you can do every day for the rest of your life, then I mean that's really what lifelong fluency is all about. And
yeah, well, but that's a great point there, because really it's a bit like exercise or eating healthily or something. It's not something that we do because we have to, although most people still think about it that way. It needs to be something that becomes a lifestyle.
So this has been just a taste of my full conversation with Olly. So if you've learned something or you feel inspired, then I want to invite you to listen to the whole incredible interview for free by clicking the link in the description. And now it's time to go beyond the classroom and live your English. Aw, yeah.
do you have any advice for learners like that if you don't have that support network around you, what they can do to not give up, to not lose that passion?
Okay, that's a very good question. So it's kind of a very difficult situation what
Right.
you described, like when a person doesn't have any support and maybe even resources and opportunities.